Hi everyone, welcome back to sj'sclasses. This is a video lesson on yet another topic that has been prescribed for study in your syllabus. I hope my videos are beneficial to all of you. Even though I do these videos for students of a particular university, I do it in such a way that anyone who wants further information on it gets it. So I hope my videos are indeed beneficial. The work that I intend to discuss today is a poem. It's titled Harlem. It's written by the American poet Langston Hughes. Here is a very brief introduction to this poet. James Mercer Langston Hughes was an American poet, social activist, novelist, playwright, and columnist. He was born on February 1st, 1902 in Joplin, Missouri, which is a Midwestern state in central United States. He did many odd jobs before settling down as a writer. He worked as an assistant cook, launderer, a busboy, and even as a seaman. His first poem was titled The Negro Speaks of Rivers. It was written in 1921. It appeared in the journal titled The Crisis. Hughes' first book of poetry was titled The Weary Blues. It came out in 1926. His second collection of poetry, which was titled Fine Clothes to the Jew, came out in 1927. In 1930, he published his first novel, Not Without Laughter, and it won the Harmon Gold Medal for Literature in the same year. For those of you who are not aware of what Harmon Gold Medal for Literature is, it's an award created in 1926 by William E. Harmon, who was a white philanthropist. Philanthropist is a person who works for human well-being. And this award was created to recognize African American achievements in music, visual arts, literature, etc. Langston Hughes is also known as one of the earliest innovators of the literary art form called jazz poetry. Jazz poetry is poetry that is read to the accompaniment of jazz music. It can also be treated as poetry in which the poet responds to and writes about jazz. It takes jazz music, musicians, or the jazz milieu as its subject. So, jazz poetry can be interpreted in both ways. It can be treated as poetry that is read to the accompaniment of jazz music, or it can be treated as poetry that talks about or writes about jazz music. His first piece of jazz poetry, When Sue Wears Red, was written when he was in high school. Hughes is best known as a leader of the Harlem Renaissance. The very title of the poem that we are about to discuss today is Harlem. So, Harlem Renaissance plays an important role in this particular context. I'll definitely talk about this Renaissance, this movement later on in this video. Langston Hughes' life and works were enormously important in shaping the artistic contributions of the Renaissance. In 1940, Hughes published The Big C, which is his autobiography up to the age of 28. His play Mulatto, adapted from one of his short stories titled Father and Son, premiered on Broadway in 1935. So, Mulatto is one of his famous plays. It's a play about race issues. The very term mulatto means an offspring of a black and a white parent. So, it's quite intriguing in nature. And it was adapted from one of his short stories titled Father and Son, which appeared as one of the stories in a collection titled The Ways of the White Folks. It was compiled by Hughes in 1934. So his first play, Mulatto, was premiered on Broadway in 1935. He also founded theater companies in Harlem and Los Angeles, the former in 1937 and the latter in 1939. He died of complications from prostate cancer on May 22nd, 1967 in New York City. That's all about Langston Hughes. Now, as I said earlier, I would like to give you a brief idea regarding the movement called Harlem Renaissance. Here are a few sentences on it. Harlem Renaissance was the most influential movement in African American literary history that celebrated both black life and culture. The origins of Harlem Renaissance lie in the great migration of the early 20th century, especially between 1916 to 1970, when hundreds of thousands of African American people migrated from the South into dense urban areas of the North and Midwest regions of the United States, especially to places like Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, Philadelphia, and New York. They migrated to escape from the economic exploitation that happened in the South, as most of them were tenants or farmers, and also to escape from violent and pervasive racism. Now, if you get time, please do read about rules like Jim Crow laws, which were practiced in the United States earlier, which openly segregated uh, blacks to second class citizens, which actually gave the whites the power to subdue the blacks. So please do read about things like Jim Crow laws and other issues associated with racism that would help you understand why this movement gained significance, or this movement helped African Americans. This movement called Harlem Renaissance, as well as this movement from the south to the north and the Midwest regions of United States. It turned out to be a movement which helped them flourish, or helped them get their freedom, the kind of life that they wanted. Harlem, a district of New York, became a destination for African Americans of all backgrounds. It is believed that more than 175 African Americans settled in Harlem alone. A lot of new establishments began to grow up. This area began to be concentrated by African Americans, and as a part of this, a lot of new businesses run by African Americans emerged. They African American owned businesses, from newspapers, publishing houses, music companies, nightclubs, cabarets, and theaters grew up in this particular locality named Harlem. The Great Migration also drew to Harlem some of the greatest minds and the brightest talents of the day, which included an astonishing array of African American artists and scholars. Writers like Zora Neale Hurston, Wallace Thurman, Claude McKay, County Cullen, Richard Bruce, Aaron Douglas, James Weldon Johnson, and Langston Hughes came into the scene and wrote specifically about Black lives, infusing their works with the real life actualities and experience of the African Americans. They depicted the low life in their art, that is, the real lives of African Americans in the lower social economic strata. Such works were also created in other realms like painting, sculpture, jazz, swing, opera, and dance. What united these diverse art forms was their realistic presentation of what it meant to be black in America, what writer Langston Hughes called an expression of our individual dark skinned selves. This particular statement was made in his essay, The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, that came out in 1926. Amongst the most significant contributors were intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Cyril Briggs, and Walter Francis White. We also have electrifying performers like Josephine Baker and Paul Robeson as part of this group. We also have writers and poets like Zora Neale Hurston, Effie Lee Newsom, County Cullen. We have visual artists like Aaron Douglas and Augusta Savage, and an extraordinary list of legendary musicians including Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, U.B. Blake, Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Ivy Anderson, Josephine Baker, Fats Waller, Jelly Roll Morton, and countless others. So this is all about the movement called Harlem Renaissance. Now let me give you a detailed analysis of the poem Harlem. Harlem was published in 1951 as a part of a larger book of poems titled Montage of a Dream Deferred. It is a work centered on working class and poor African Americans. Let's read the poem once. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it sting like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So the poet begins by talking about a dream that is deferred. Defer means hold back to a later time or put something on hold for a later time. In Malayalam, we say Neetivekkiga or Mativekkiga. So, what is this dream that has been deferred or put on hold for a later time? It could be interpreted as a collective social dream, the dream of an entire group of people, the African Americans, as it is indicated by the title Harlem, which was a black American or African American neighborhood in New York City. Or it may also be interpreted as an individual dream, the dream of the speaker or the poet. So anyway, he begins by talking about a dream that is deferred. Now, the untold fact about both these dreams are that they are connected, be it the dream of the social group or the community, or the dream of the individual. Both these dreams are connected, and perhaps all of them share a common dream, which is liberation. Liberation from the clutches or grudges or fetters of racism. Now, what is this dream that they all had in common? That is something to be analyzed as well. There were a lot of factors like the Jim Crow laws that enforced racial segregation, the civil rights movement, which were mass protest movements against racial segregation and discrimination in the southern United States that came to national prominence during the mid 1950s. That could be a reason for this common dream. And also World War II, when the black Americans fought in the United States military. Now, this was done to defeat Nazism and to defend American visions of equality and liberty. But these blacks were forced to work in the army within segregated ranks, and all this, I believe, paved way to this common dream of this suppressed community. Now, what we readers confront next in the poem is a set of questions that connect to the first line of the poem, or the concept of the deferred dream. The poet or the speaker asks, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So it's a simile that we have here. So what he asks is, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So the very first analogy is with a fruit which was once juicy, a nutritious food, which has now become dry and useless. This image carries the connotation that the dream was a living entity and now it has been dried up, probably due to being being ignored frequently. That is why it was ignored. It is probably because this dream was neglected for too long that it dried up. The next question that he asks is, does it fester? Fester means to ripen and generate pus. So does it fester like a sore? Sore means an open skin infection. So does it fester like a sore and then run? So is it something like a flesh wound which once neglected begin to turn bad and could be harmful, which could even cause death? So what the poet does is he compares the dream to a sore on the body and states that unfulfilled dreams become part of us, just like a long standing injury that has gathered pus. So, what he means is that a postponed or deferred dream is like a painful injury that begins to be infected. Is it something like that? He's trying to draw an analogy there. The third question he raises is whether it stings like rotten meat, a proteinaceous foodstuff which has been left out or forgotten about, and it's already begun to rot. So this image intensifies the disgust that we felt from the earlier lines. Hughes suggests that dreams deferred will pester on continually and keep on stinging like rotten meat, meaning it could make one sick until they are cared for. So it's not something to be ignored. It has to be cared for. It is not something which must be forgotten. It must be thought about. The poet again brings in the idea of the ignored dream in the next lines when he says, "Oh, crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet." So, what he means is that does it get all crusty like sugary syrup left out in the open air? Again, the concept of being ignored or forgotten. And he finally concludes by stating that maybe the burden of the unfulfilled dream remains in the hearts of millions who have lost their dreams. He asks, When the burden gets unbearable, will it explode? So that is how he ends the poem. So the poem does not just speak of the unfulfilled dreams of the African Americans, but also questions the limitations placed on these people by the white society that have turned the lives of these people into a bad dream. And you can discuss several themes as part of this. One is, of course, the obvious theme, which is racism. The poem exemplifies the negative effects that oppressive racism had on African Americans at that time. The second could be the theme of injustice. This goes along with racism, which is part and parcel of this systematic practice of segregation called racism. A third theme could be hopelessness. The poem definitely captures the hopelessness that goes along with being unable to be successful and having one's dream actualized or materialized. Rather, it is being deferred or postponed in the poem, or it actually happened in their lives. So that's all about this poem. I hope you have an overall understanding of this work. Thank you so much for being with me. If you are here on my channel for the first time, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you know anyone who would want such video lessons, please do share the channel's link to them. Thank you so much for being with me.